Hey, hi Parag. Hey Parag, you able to hear me?
Hey, Ryan. Yep. I,
Okay, awesome. You wanna quickly super. Good. Great setup.
huh?
I said the great setup.
Work from home. That's
Right. So how are things? I mean, I think Pune is still recovering, right?
yeah. So I mean, things are as far as sitting in the home, they are good. Outside, it's a bit tense out in many ways,
Mm.
mostly in terms of the medical stuff. But
Mm.
otherwise, all well. I mean, if you take precautions, all is fine. I
Mm.
think Bangalore is gone in lockdown, right?
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, I think soon most of the places uh, once we can.
So, hoping in the lockdown time, those plans go on well. So just a little bit of we already Diane already introduced me, but just to set the context, um, that's me. And when I say me, there are a lot of me's in this. So I'm an artist, an animator, and designer by profession. So this sets a good context for what we are going to talk about, because there will be a lot of mixture in terms of, talking about motion, animation, and there will be a crisscross between UX design, and probably a bit of art. But let's go ahead and see what we have there. So this is something, motion is communication. That's what we are going to talk about. And precisely what I mean by that is, um, the way we are going to have this session is, like, if we have to just talk about the high pointers, one is deconstructing motion. Then how is traditional animation and perhaps motion design, or motion in terms of UX, that we can relate to, and what are the principles of animation and how we can put them into context of UX, because that is something that is coming up big time. Like, animation as an industry has been there for a very long time, as we know it. And motion graphics, I guess, came to limelight when the television was there. And after, once the digital media came in, the motion graphics percolated in that. But in the context of UX, it has been a late entry for motion or animation, and there have been a lot of factors to that. One of them is how the UX industry has been shaping up, and that was one of the reasons. The second reason, I think, was the tools that were not so, I would say, equipped for the digital medium. Like, I remember there was a lot of usage of Flash and so forth, and GIFs as well, which sometimes worked, sometimes didn't work. But at this point of time, we have a lot of different file formats that are very light in weight, and way better than GIFs and the traditional format that we had. I guess it started with Airbnb. Airbnb, it's like a favorite case study for the UX industry. So Airbnb was the one who came up with, their research team came up with some format, which is Lottie animation, and that worked well with After Effects, and it created vector animation. So that was when the breakthrough, or I would say that was when things started opening up in terms of using animation or motion in terms of UX. Otherwise, UX had been, I would say, kind of a flatland for a very long time. And animation definitely, or motion definitely, is helping a lot in terms of adding, like as you said, Dayan, a delight factor definitely, but also in terms of usability. It is being seen that way. So yeah, so let's talk a bit about it. And before we go, here's a small, I would say, and just to set a context. There are a few couple of things that would explain how motion works or how animation works. So if there is anything, you can just stop me and ask anything, right? That's how the session is. So yeah. So if I have to ask, what is this? And I guess the common knowledge or the common perception would be, okay, this is a circle in um, in a certain format, right? Or if you think more in an imaginative way, someone might say, okay, okay, this is a universe or something like that. But as a common knowledge, we all agree that this is just a circle and it is in a particular space, right? So now we are just going to do simple intervention within that circle, right? So this is one. Again, simple intervention within the same circle. So what happened here? It's like we had a simple circle, but these simple interventions suddenly change the whole scenario, right? There is when now that the common knowledge was it's a circle, suddenly with a simple intervention and a motion, it suddenly started to add it added a narrative to it, right? A certain story started going in our mind, right? Like suddenly that became this became something like, and it's very obvious, an egg, somebody watching with a certain kind of characterization coming in, and suddenly this circle became a moon just because the witch passed through that. So that's the first level of adding motion, that there is a possibility of adding a narrative, a story to it, right? Now, if you go ahead and do a bit more play in that, so this is another one. Yeah, again a simple animation, but what the scenario did, it definitely had some character into it. This example doesn't really showcase what the quality of the animation, but the purpose of the animation, right? So here, if the imagination was, imagine that was like a frog and it looked here and there and it jumped to one side of the frame, and immediately we have an idea of direction, right, and orientation. Okay, that ball bounced from one thing, from one place to a particular direction. And then the same element, as it enters into a frame, you can notice that there is some form of relation of that particular circle with the other three circles, right? So we establish that relation in a certain way by the way it has been animated, the way it has been positioned, right? So these are the things uh, that we can add from a static, and when we convert that static into a motion, the first thing definitely is it triggers emotion and it sets a narrative rolling. The second is it gives a sense of direction and a spatial context. Currently what we saw was very simplistic animation, very simple form, but with a few hints of foreground, background, we can definitely give a spatial context. What is the relation between um, the space and a particular element in that space? Okay, what happened here? Just a minute.
You're not able to move to the next one?
Yeah, just 1 second. Yep, we are there.
Okay.
So as you see, there's also establishing of relation with other entities. When the bigger circle entered the frame, there were three small circles, presumably the way I imagined it, like a mother frog jumped in and the baby frog were interacting with that, right? So there's a certain kind of relation that we build by the way things move in respect to each other, right? And lastly, but not the least, it is comprehension. Like, it's easy comprehension and recall. I don't have to put a lot of screen real estate. I don't have to put a lot of words there. It's just about somebody seeing it and trying to get the information from that. It's kind of a passive thing as of now, but it makes the understanding very easy. And the more the way you can present it definitely gives a good recall as well. So far, I think are things going fine? I mean, in terms of how we are following all of them. Cool. So now that we have some basic, okay, what motion adds to a particular static frame. Now, what is it that make this motion so appealing, or rather believable? That is something we'll take some cues from the old traditional animation. So there's a secret recipe, and definitely it is pure physics. Uh, by pure physics, I don't mean we have to go into any formulas or anything, but it is like learning from the basic principles of what we see in the physical world, right? So there was these three laws of motion by Newton, and all the early animators, they studied all these laws and accordingly came up with a few principles of animation. So the first law states that the law of inertia, and it was way back in the Greek mythology, and then Galileo that said, okay, all objects primarily have what I would say, they are inert. They have a resting, they rest. So what I mean by they have a resting position, it is like all the forces that are acting on that particular object are balanced. So for example, the ball in this example, it is kept on the ground. So there is a gravitational force, but at the same time, the ground is also acting as a force. So that's how it is balanced, and the ball stays in its place unless some unbalanced force forces it to move. So this is like a inertia, like a Sunday, like when you feel so lazy, and unless there is something that moves you, you don't move, right? And once things are moving according to Newton or according to the law of physics, they keep on moving unless and until it is stopped by an equivalent force. So now, once the ball is in motion, it if there is nothing that's going to stop it, it will continue to be in motion. That's what the law states. But in this case, what happens? Everything in the atmosphere will have a certain friction. That's an atmospheric friction. There is something or some or the other thing that the ball will hit and it will stop. So that's how it works. That's the first law of inertia. The second is the law of acceleration, and acceleration is basically it is directly proportional to the mass and the force applied. So when it's a very lighter mass, it might need a simple flick that would move that object. But when it's a big mass, then probably it will need more force, and so on and so forth. So depending on that, the acceleration will happen, correct? And the third law states it's the law of action reaction. Every action will have equal and opposite reaction. So that's okay. A person is sleeping and someone gets hit, and it's a big hit. So that it's like it's the most common and the most I would say this law is known to many people. That's the law of action and reaction. So these are the three laws that were the fundamental part that created the principles of animation. And this goes back way in the 1980s when the early Disney animators, they used to experiment a lot, and these were the people who actually came up with the fundamentals of using these laws so to create some magical effect on the screen. Um, so Frank and Oli, they were the early animators, and what they did was they documented all these principles that they used to use while animating in a lovely book called Illusion of Light. And this is like a Bible for most of the animators, and it states all the interesting stories of how the early animation used to happen, how they used to experiment, how they came up with all these fundamental laws, right? So let's go through these principles and let's see all the examples. So now we'll have a lot of examples to see rather than, so what I've done is I have collected a lot of stuff from here and there and put it together so that we understand what each law is and how we relate it to UX or the digital world as well. So the first is squash and stretch, and this can be easily visualized or understood by a balloon, water-filled balloon. Like once you see the water-filled balloon, you know how it behaves once you put force on its sides, or the way, is to keep it on the table. If you bounce it, the way it works. So this is exactly the same principle. This is exactly how all the object works when there's a certain force applied onto it. So these are the examples of how these principles are used. Some of them might be a bit exaggerated, but some of them might be used subtly. So that is something we will come across as a different principle. But yeah, so what matters here is all things are different, and by different I mean they are made up of different material. Just imagine a metal ball and a rubber ball, how it will behave. But a certain forces that will always act upon. The first is the gravity, that will always be acting on each and every object. Then secondly, once we are animating it, or once we are using it in a space, there is no change in volume. It is just a change in the shape, I would say, right? Once the impact happens, it either squashes or stretches, but the primary volume always remains the same. Yeah. So the as much it is stretching, at the same I would say degree, it will also squash when it is going down. So look at the horse while it is running. You can see. So this is a very live example, in the sense that, okay, this is a real photographic example. But by the way, this is by Edward Muybridge, and again, Edward Muybridge was a person who actually shot hundreds of human activities and even animals and birds in motion, and he's documented it in I would say it's called pixelation. So each of this is actually not a film. This is a series of photographs taken by Edward, and he has taken it strategically so that it becomes a cycle. So this is like a run cycle of a horse, correct? But here the point is, look at the way it is stretching and squashing as it is moving ahead with that force. Another favorite character and good example, the genie. The stretch and squash is, I'm on the call. The stretch and squash is a bit exaggerated, but here, more than the body, it is about the intention of the character, right? The way it is used to intend the emotional state of the character. Again, another example here. So here is a good breakdown how it starts. Like there's a start, then there is a squash. At the amount of squash will decide the amount of stress later on, and then there is a landing field part where is the impact. where again there is a squash, and then it's a settlement. So if you have to see it in the US perspective, again, this is a very first and simple principle. We will come to more complicated ones in a further part. But you see how the button behave when it is pressed, like it is kind of a stretch and squash. Even in terms of accordions and things moving like panels and so forth. If you add the stretch and squash, it will give a kind of an elasticity or a more natural, more naturalness to that particular movement. So the classic accordion, again, a good example of, I think it's a more of a conceptual example rather than the physical example, squash and stretch. There's a fluidity in that movement. How things are moving. So with that, we come to the second principle, which is anticipation. Anticipation is also, as the name suggests, it anticipation. So it's something that that happens before the action. So the good example is when you stretch a rubber band and you're targeting something, you pull that rubber band. So that is that is in anticipation to the actual action that is going to happen, right? So in this example, you see how the cube moves side to side and then takes the real action. It is kind of, you prepare for that particular action. If you just imagine yourself when you are going to jump or you're going to throw a ball, you go behind and then throw the ball. It is so in the actual physical world, it is the preparation for that action. But when it comes to the screen, you also give that opportunity to the audience. Okay, the audience also gets prepared for that particular action, right? Again, an example from Edward Mybray. See, there is a certain position that he takes before leaping into that jump. Another Disney classic. Before taking the jump, there was a big anticipation that happened. Again, if you notice that the way things move, now this is something which happens for each and every principle, like whatever the character is or that material is, accordingly that principle needs to be applied. Like in this case, look at the realistic anticipation and look at the anticipation that the rabbit takes, right? It all depends on the characters. So anticipation can be physical and anticipation can be internal. This is a very subtle way of telling the audience that, okay, there is something that is going to happen. The way he looks at the cup and then picks up the cup, that's a very subtle hint. Correct? At the same time, look at this action. Before something zooms past, the character actually turns to the left of the screen. That is again a very subtle hint to the viewer that, yeah, there's something is going to happen on that corner of the screen. Now anticipation is fine, but look at the what I would say, it's equally anticipation decides what is the force that is going to be applied onto that particular action, and it has to balance, otherwise there will be a mismatch, right? Like in this case, if you see, there is a normal jump and there is a jump with the weight. So look at the difference in the anticipation. This example shows the exact opposite. The way he anticipates is way too strong, but it's an anticlimax, right? The way he runs doesn't really match the anticipation. So you might use that for a comic end, but in reality that won't be the case, correct? The rollover in a particular on a particular action is a classic example of anticipation. So what we call the affordance, right? We give a certain affordance to certain element. I would also call that as an anticipation. Okay, that particular object has a certain affordance. So one is definitely the rollover. Then when you scroll onto a certain screen, there is the one element peeps in from the side, right? It gives a hint of there is something more coming. So that's also a case of anticipation in terms of UX. And the more you make it beautiful, the more the user would want to take the action, or vice versa. Next is staging, and I guess this is where the first two were very much related to the physical, I would say, action, but staging is something which is, as its name suggests, it's kind of it has planning and structure behind it, and it literally means, so the staging, the whole concept of staging directly comes from theater. If you try to remember theater, the theater is a place where, a director or a person who is going to act needs to make sure that the audience sees that particular character in, I would say, as an emphasis or as a focal point, and there should not be any distraction to that. And secondly, as far as theater is concerned, everybody's front is not the same, right? People sitting on the corner might see it differently. People sitting behind might see it differently. So that's where staging is very important. And it has been carried forward into filmmaking and later into animation as well. So what the staging does, it basically, you need to add clarity and focus to that particular scene or that particular screen, I would rather say. It is where you need to set things in such a way that the user doesn't feel, or the viewer doesn't feel, that okay, he's not able to understand where exactly is the scene. So it's like directing the user's attention to a certain entity or a certain character or a certain point. This is very much like eye direction that we follow in visual design, right? How the user's eye should move from one place to other. That is kind of a staging. So here it is very simple. Okay, I am here. The cube announces with those particular, lines, but that is what something in a simplistic way is staging. So one of the ways that animators use is the silhouette idea, where if you see, each of these silhouettes will clearly tell the posture of that particular character, or even there is a hint of the character in the way it is behaving or standing. In this example, if you see, this is also a good drawing and this is also a good drawing. But if you see the silhouette, right, this is a clear indication what is happening in this particular scene. But here you can't make out what is happening. Right? So in scenes where their lighting is of most important, this makes a lot of difference. Like even on the stage or in the actual theater, where lighting is a very important part of staging. Like if you have to move the viewer's eye to a certain place, suddenly you will see light going from one place to the other place, right? Another example of how staging can be done. Look at the hand position in this silhouette and look at the hand position here. It's way more clear, correct? So this is what in terms of individual posters are within a frame. But but it also matters how you stage the entire frame, right? It's about camera angles. It's about all the visual elements that are within that particular frame. Like in this case, you can see everything is pointing at the mouse, and you know where to focus as a user. Similarly, if you see these, all the visual elements or all the eye direction is moving to that particular, even his nose, everything is pointing at him. In this case, again, a similar way. So the whole thing is structured in such a way that as a viewer, I am not confused where what to see next, correct? So it's, and cinematically there are a lot of tools or a lot of things used to handle this. Camera angle, then there's lighting, there's movement, the visual structure, and even camera focus. Like the camera might focus onto something and the things beyond that will be out of focus, so and so forth. Another thing that cinema uses or even animation uses is a 180-degree rule, where there is an invisible line in the center, and whatever is on the left will always be on the left, and whatever is on the right will always be on the right. So, and that goes on for the whole sequence. So there is, even in terms of orientation, right? Orientation, it doesn't confuse the viewer. So that's in terms of how the staging evolved and it came into animation. The classic example. So here is an interesting clip you would want to see. Are you guys able to hear the sound of this?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Ignore the language.
Oh my god!
You see, not just in terms of the actual activity that is happening, it never lost focus, and none of the background elements were overwhelming, that the actual subject of this particular scene was lost, correct? The mosquito was always seen in each and every shot. Similar way, in this, yeah. So it might seem very simple and a very generic animation clip, and irrespective of what the style and language is, if you notice, the character never left the center position. However, it has been all the background elements kept on moving, right? And the character always remained in the center. So again, that is a very strategic decision to make. This is another example you will find. Your eye will only look at what needs to be seen. So the basic takeaway is every scene or every screen will have a certain important thing to tell, right? So we should make sure by all the elements that we have, we should make sure that that focus is not lost. Like here are a few examples in the context of the UX, right? And in terms of, so my whole sheet, what we are seeing as principles of animation, these have been done or documented and used for a very different purpose, like all the traditional animators, animation, so on and so forth. And even today for animation films, they are used. But what here I'm trying to do is I'm also trying to put them into the context of UX. And definitely there are some variables there. Some might fit, some may not fit. But fundamentally, they will follow certain or the other principle for sure. So here in this case, if you see, once you click on a certain button, there is no sliding in here, but here it is, and that orientation that helps as a user to understand what is happening and how things are related, right? And I see that as a part of staging, that as a user, I don't lose focus, correct? Another example is status. Like once you click, probably instead of showing the status as a separate thing, you combine that with the element itself. So it seamlessly follows through, right? Check the difference. Like here, yeah, it has been, I mean, he has tried to put emphasis, but that doesn't really calls for your attention. And in this case, there is a slight pulsation which definitely calls for some attention. And here actually the screen is very blank and still that happens, right? Check the context here. So it's usually there is a very subtle difference, though it is the overlay comes in context of the button, but one is actually coming from the button and one is just appearing. So there's a subtle difference, but you might not notice it, like, okay, this has happened, but your eye and brain registers that. So when it comes to staging, like we had certain tools that cinema or animation use, like there are camera angles, there are lighting, there is probably focus unfocus, and so on and so forth. Similarly, I feel there are a few elements or a few tools or a few ways that designers can use and use, right, to set the stage. So one is definitely the overlay, where you give a progressive reveal, right? You don't show everything at a time, but you will show, okay, what is important first and what is logically what should follow, right? Then there is obscuration, where you a simple example could be a light box. So the next video is not playing properly. Okay. Then there is masking. Again, from this to whatever the focus is, right? Cloning somewhat, but it helps, like to structure the information and then use it, use the exploded view only when it is necessary. Sorry. Parallax is a very known way. Again, another example of progressive reveal where you have you can tell if there is more information or there are bigger narratives to be told. This one comes from the cinema or even in animation, where you zoom into a particular thing and focus. So that was staging, and I think that apart from other principles which rather follows the physical world, staging is something which is more like a created world, right? So how you can create that particular stage or screen which would help the user or the viewer to follow through his story. Follow through is interesting, and basically, if you imagine a superhero and his cape, so the superhero will be flying and it's a parent body that is moving, but the cape will follow in the air. You can see that movement happening, right? So there is a primary object which moves and other objects which are probably attached in some way to that primary object, how they follow, right? And then there is an overlapping action. If it is not a follow through, it is an overlap. The primary object is moving, and because of that, how the other object gets affected. The man is walking, but look at the car that moves separately from his walk cycle or body movement. Another example from Edward, look at the cat and look at the tail that is, it's kind of a follow through, how the tail is moving in a different way. So the classic is parenting basically. So one object is moving and the other object follows. You know? So this is kind of, you can see a delayed parenting. There is a delay in this. You change the position in the list and there is some follow through. Or you can even relate it to as a secondary action, which is another principle that will come through. Look how things are not moving and stopping at the same time, right? Things are following the other. So in that sense, as a user or as a viewer, I also get to, get some hierarchy there. Okay, this is first, this is second, this is third, and so on and so forth. Cool. So are we there? All following, or are we losing anything?
These are all like very pretty interesting. Yep. Just
Cool.
gives us the basics of how these are all applied in the UX part. Very
Yeah.
interesting. Just a quick check-in on time. So yeah, we have 10 minutes. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I should just hurry it, I guess. So there's then we have the slow in and slow out. Again, this is something which can be experienced in a pendulum, and basically more than that, when you are in a car, you don't directly get into your desired speed, right? You accelerate, and when you want to stop, you decelerate and then stop. So that also it's called ease in and ease out, and it's a very you will hear many of the animators talking about it. Either it's called ease in, ease out, or it's called cushioning. But it gives a good, believable, fluid, and natural movement to each and every object. And rather than having a very hard action, it smoothens it out, and definitely that helps a lot of comprehension in part of the users as well, or the viewers. Right? Check this. You can see the amount of keyframes in the first. That means it's a slow thing. Then in between there are less keyframes, and in the last there are more keyframes again. So ease in and ease out, right? You can see the ball. The fluidity is because of that squash and stretch plus ease in, ease out. Yeah, so there's a different ease in, ease out here. So when the things are coming in, it is more of a ease out. So it comes in slowly, but while going back, it goes out fast because we don't really need that object. So we can take that. So there is a different way of easing, ease out. So this is from the material design. So Google material design has laid out good, good, rules for using motion in animation. And this practice of using motion in the style guide is evolving very well. Now people, apart from having a static style guide, they are also having guidelines for how to use motion in their particular app. So again, this is actually very subtle difference between what the uses of easing, but yeah, it will differ a lot. Like you can this is a good example. Look at the fluidity that because of the easing it comes in. Timing after staging, I would say timing is one of the very important aspects. And why so? Because like though we have ease in and ease out in both these actions, the timing for both the objects is very different, and it all depends on one the intent of that particular object or the material, or you can even say uh, depending on the necessity of the story, right? Things move at a different speed. Like here, the same ball, but it's a different speed. There's a different timing. The principles are the same. The timing is different. And where does that help um, is basically building a choreography into your screen or into your scene as well. Again, my presentation is stuck, I think. Just a moment.
Yep. Yeah.
No, it is stuck.
Yeah. Using.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got it.
Maybe because of the video. Okay, so Here you can see a good example. Again, this is something from material design, and this is more in context of UX, and we are talking in terms of milliseconds here. You just have to, it's like 1,000 milliseconds is 1 second. That's how the equation is. And in UX, most of the timing, the desired timings are between 200 to 500 ms. And they all depend on the kind of platform that you're having. That smaller the device, faster the animation will happen, and larger the area to cover, it will more, or at max, if at all there is some narrative there, then probably it will go in a few seconds. See? So here is where timing is very important. Look at this example and how things are choreographed. And every time you still remain focused. Okay, what is the thing that that needs to be seen, right? The left side has good speed while the right side is a bit slow. Now, when it comes to UX, that is something which is very important. Like how, what is the timing that will create the desired output? The right side is slow, the left side has a better flow, I would say. Oh, my right and what you see on the screen is different. Again, this is a similar example. When things are coming in, they are a bit slow while resting, but when they are going out of the frame, the ease out is way faster. That's the part of timing. The timing is where you can choreograph your multiple interactions that are happening, right? Again, coming back to something very physical, and there are paths of motion. So every movement will happen along a certain path, and that natural path needs to be respected and used in the action. Right from big physical movement also to the subtle movement, exactly like even the turning of the eye will have a certain arc. It won't go like, okay, from straight from here to here, unless you want to do it that way in terms of design. But naturally, it will have an arc. A head turn will have an arc. An expression will have a certain arc. And that will make your animation or your movements more realistic and believable. Look at the arc of the action. In fact, those also provide a good guideline for the animator as well as somebody who is seeing it. That's the underlying thread that follows the motion. Look at the arc in this example. The first one and the second one. There is a certain structure that is followed, while on the next, it just mixes up everything and then again go on the right hand side, right? Can you see the arc? One is pretty straight, the other is alternate. Zigzag and diagonal. So what is easier on the eye and what is more, rather a bit jittery on the eye? That's the difference. So the left hand side happens with the arc, while right hand side are all different. That subtlety happened in this action because of that earlier arc that the left panel had. It gives a nice fluid movement. Secondary action is the next principle, and where, as the name says, it is a secondary action in addition to the main primary action. And I will show you a better example for this. So look at these two actions. One is the person sits in the chair and nothing is lost. I mean, it's still a complete action. But in the second one, there is a small after action that happens just to adjustment of the chair that adds to the realism, right? Like when you're showing clearly the main action is thinking, but at the same time the fiddling with the leg gives a different angle to it. Same here. Removing of the specs while talking or while, just sitting out there, playing with the pencil. These are all secondary actions, which actually doesn't matter to show the primary, right? The primary action is still complete, but the secondary action adds a realism to it, adds something, a character to it. Celebration, like something, oh yeah, it's a real reward, right? You can just press the button and do away, but then there is something that happens beyond that. Exaggeration, again, as the name suggests, and very widely used in animation. And probably, as far as UX is concerned, that is something which is best kept at bay, but depending on how you want to use it, obviously. So that adds hyperrealism, that adds a comical character to things. Still a couple of examples. Like the whole block becomes colored, right? Even here, if you see, there's slightly exaggerated movement. Solid drawings is a very related to animation, but I still feel that that is something which is very structural and basic to the output. Like in comparison, if you want to see it in UX, the basic wireframe or the gray things that you see while loading, that is something which forms the structure. And if that structure is not planned well, then probably things won't go well. Appeal is the last one, and appeal is something which is like cherry on the top, and that is something which adds all the principles into one to give a final feel to your screen. Like in if you're talking in terms of visual, then it's about lighting, it's about texture, it's about color, style, so on and so forth. But fundamentally, it also has to be about the structure. Like in this case, look, it's a simple walk cycle, but the way it is being portrayed for each character is very unique and different. And that adds appeal to that particular movement. You see there's a secondary action as well, where he, instead of going straight, the boy as a character turns and again walks straight. So this also has to, in appeal, you can also consider branding as a part of appeal, where you add another layer. And in terms of motion, whether you can decide what is the kind of motion that dictates and talks about your brand, whether it's snappy, whether it's natural, it can be bouncy. Of course, we'll have to consider usability as well while using all this. Another factor of appeal is using dimensions in the UX, apart from branding. Cool. So those all were the principles that we had. Having said that, a few things that how to use animation in particular, especially in the context of UX. One is definitely animation should not be an afterthought. It should be planned well ahead while the interaction or the wireframes are done. Animation must serve a purpose. So all the movement needs to be planned in such a way that, okay, you need to give some feedback, you need to provide some orientation, or you need to, add a narrative. So it has to serve some purpose. Animation must reflect a brand or a character. If there is no brand, at least there will be a character to your interface. It might be directed to a certain kind of user, right? So it will have a certain character. So your animation should reflect that. And lastly, it should definitely feel natural, like following all the principles of animation. And it should not become the hero. The hero, you need to identify what is the hero of your interfaces and accordingly use animation. Yep, that's pretty much it.
Yep, I think that's a wonderful session, Parag. I think it was one of those master classes, right? So where you took us to all those basic principles and how it can be. And the best part was you were able to quickly apply some of these concepts on this traditional thing was with respect to the UX UI. So I think most of our folks would have definitely got related to it. So folks, please, if you have any questions, I know we're over the mark, but yeah, I think we can quickly take a couple of questions. I have couple.
Sure.
So yeah, so the first one is like, yeah, I mean, since you have come from definitely like a little bit of those traditional cell animation to the digital, right? So do you think these new age motion graphic guys have more advantage of some? I mean, maybe because of the tools, or I don't know, like, or you think that the previous gen people have much more stronger advantage because they have those principles are much more stronger.
So I guess, see, as far as principles are there, the fundament, they will remain the fundamental
Right.
yesterday or tomorrow or today. So it's just about the tools that are changing. And I see there are so many talented motion designers out there. It is just that it needs to be applied well in the context of UX that need to be learned. And when I say in the context of UX, it's not just about applying motion to it, but applying motion in a very, I would say, in a planned way. So where it is necessary, that way, correct?
Got it. Yep. Yep. So that brings to my another question. My question is like what you think is like kind of a must to have skill set for to be a good animator, right? I mean, if for you, if you want to pick top three, what will be your tip for?
So definitely one is understanding the traditional principle, that is for sure.
Mhm.
In fact, if you want to be a motion, again, yeah, it's not like a blanket thing. I want to be a motion designer and what to do for that. But it's also about what kind of a motion designer and where do you want to apply yourself in terms of that domain as well. Like if you want to be a motion designer in the context of strictly into the context of UX, then probably you would have certain slightly different skill set that are necessary than what are needed for probably uh, people who are more inclined to, like, storytelling part. Like motion design is not just used for the UX. It can
Right.
be used for product videos. It can be used for explainer videos. It can be used for concept, just explaining conceptual models. So each will have their own set of skill set that are necessary, but primarily they would need to understand how things move, and that's is the principles of design. Sorry, the animation.
Got it. Yep. Yep. I think one last question that I had was, so I know that there is a little bit of, I would say, so animation is all like a lot of creative side, right? But this, because of this UX UI, the motion graphics part, it's more of a little bit of, I would say, logical thing, right? And you said that the exaggeration part is totally parked, right? But that's the best part of animation, right? So you can do things which you can't even film it, right?
Correct,
So
correct.
yeah, so my question now is like, so is there any kind of a tip or where we can try and make sure our creative aspect has been like a little more nudged, right? Because too much of the rational thinking and problem solving also like sometimes pushes you hard on your creative side. So how do you try and hit a balance between this?
So again, that is something, as I said, that was something we talked about, right? Animation has to be considered right from the first stage of your design process, right? And if you understand your design process, then probably you know what kind of animation goes along with the kind of app that you have, or the kind of interface that you have, or the kind of audience you might deal with. Like if my audience is pretty much young, probably I would leverage some of the exaggeration, some of the
Yeah.
more squash and stretch and so on and so forth. But if it is a more of a the interface is more of a, like, on the finance side, or on something which is very utility based, probably
Okay.
then I would rather keep a, you know restriction there, where exactly we need animation and how to deal with that, right?
Yep. Agree. Yeah, I think we'll take one last question. Vikram, I think you raised your hand. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, hi Parag, Vikram here. So I
Yeah.
remember you more of a painter, installation artist, and I think we were together at Aniruddha Joshi's Monsoon.
Oh yeah, Vikram.
Yeah.
Hey Vikram. How?
Yeah. So how did this transformation to animation happen with you?
So I have always been an animator.
Okay.
My career started with being an animation.
Oh, is it?
So like way back, even before going to NID. So basically, I have done my post graduation in animation film
Okay.
design, and even before that, I was doing animation. And that's why the first slide was very important, where I set the context with, okay, I am an animator, I'm a designer, and I'm an artist as well.
Because I don't know, I remember you more of an artist and a painter kind of a person. Okay, so yeah.
Okay. I do a lot of things.
And I think you do a lot of things very well. So that is a big thing.
Great. Thanks. Nice to hear that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So I think already most of the applause are already there in the comments. Yeah, please. I think most of them are pretty glued. I think, in fact, even I was wondering that how are you going to explain this motion graphics with the presentation. But I think you did so well. So it was so smooth that we just didn't realize that the 1 hour passed. So thanks
Actually,
a lot, Parag.
Cool.
Go ahead. Sorry, you were saying something.
No, actually, I was also wondering, I thought that I would cover this up in a very less time, and a few more topics could have gone. But then I think it was pretty good. I mean, in terms of timing, we covered a lot. So that's
Yep, absolutely. Yep. Well, thanks a lot and all the very best. And yeah, thanks everybody. So have a great weekend.
Hi Parag, Sudhir here.
Hey, Sudhir. Hi.
Sudhir Siddharth. Okay, I think you.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Sudhir. Hi.
Good to join you back again, Parag. It's a nice session. It's
Cool.
always great learning from you.
Great. Thanks, Sudhir. Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Sorry?
Okay. Yep. Thanks everybody. Yep.
Thanks, guys. Stay safe.